Chelsea, can you start us off by telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure thing. So my name's Chelsea, obviously, and I am a nutrition coach full-time currently. And I have just started as well making porridges in some gym cafes in Norwich, which has been really cool. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that I absolutely adore breakfast, and now I get to make it for other people too. So that's really great. I have a dog called Winston, who is a big part of my life, and a partner called Matt. We live in Norwich together. We're both very much into CrossFit, keeping fit in general, running, dancing, yoga, and he's a PT also. So quite a fit household, you might say.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I would highly recommend people go and check out your Instagram if they want what can only be described as porridge porn, I guess. It's baked oats galore. And I will admit, and actually usually when I admit these things, it pushes me into action. I've never tried one of your recipes despite drooling over them many, many times. So now...
And I even have a free ebook that tells you how to do them all.
Okay, and the link to that free ebook is?
It's in my link tree.
Which is at Chelsea Lea Nutrition.
Exactly that.
Chelsea, Chelsea, Lea, Lea. Nutrition.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Cool. No underscores, none of that stuff?
Nope.
Well, cool. So we started with a tangent before I even asked the first question, and now we're starting with links, which are usually at the end, but I don't know how to podcast. Like, what
even is this?
What is a podcast? What do they even do? Although actually, I've just come back literally from a break yesterday, and for the first time, I had like scheduled content going out while I was away for the first time since before the pandemic. So on one hand, I feel very, very scatty, but on the other hand, I'm like, you know what? I own that. So let's go with it. So today we're on, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today is Raynauds. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. So, what is Raynauds?
So Raynauds is something that a lot of people probably have heard of through sort of friends, family members, or just people that they know, because it's a condition that has very obvious features, and that is usually that people have sort of yellow, white, blue fingers. So it's a condition where we have an oversensitivity to the cold. So whereas everyone, when they change sudden temperatures, you'll feel the cold. People with Raynauds feel it even more so, and our extremities, our fingers, our toes, sometimes our nose, nipples, all sorts of body parts can feel it. They go cold and they stay cold, which is, it's in varying levels for different people. So some people will get it and it will come and go within like an hour, and some people will have it a lot more severely. So it's a condition that can be of all different levels.
Yeah. When did you first notice it being a problem for yourself?
So I remember the first time I had symptoms when I was a little girl, and it was snowing and we were playing outside, and I had to come inside lots and lots and lots of times. And my dad would just sit and rub my feet and rub my hands, and then I'd be desperate to go back outside again, and I would. And I didn't really think much of it at the time. Like, I realized I was the only person having to do that, but I just was like, okay, and got on with it. I'd say when I was 16 and I got a moped is when I saw the symptoms getting much worse, and I'd go from home to wherever I was going, and I'd get there and not really be able to move my hands anymore. And at the time, I guess I thought that was just normal. Mum had it too. She got quite cold, but that's just what we described it as. Like, we just really feel the cold. I didn't know it was an actual condition. And then as I got older, sort of year on year, the symptoms just got worse and worse, until I eventually went to the doctors, and they said, oh, yeah, that's Raynaud's disease. And it's it's a condition that I think the doctors see so often that actually it takes a lot of persistence to get any sort of support from it. Well, for me, that was the case anyway. So I'd say it's probably 3 or 4 years going back to the doctors before I was offered any medication. There are a few different medications you can take. And the thing with Raynauds is it's called Raynauds phenomenon. And that is because there's no cure. And they've got a few medications that work for it, but none of them are really meant for Raynauds. It's sort of like they've just discovered that these help a little bit. So, for example, the medication that I currently take is Viagra. Right. And I take that twice a day. And every single time I go and pick it up from the pharmacy, the pharmacist says to me, can I ask, like, why you're taking this? Like, because Viagra doesn't work on women. And it also won't even work on a male unless they're turned on. So it obviously seems quite odd when I'm walking away with about 60 tablets of Viagra and I'll be like, yeah, I'll see you again next month.
It's definitely a side hustle, you know. If you're willing to suffer those symptoms a little bit more.
But I sort of worked my way through the medications to get to this one, and this one's that is the only one that's had a tiny impact. Like it doesn't really do a lot, but it does a little something, and that's better than nothing for me. Yeah. I have been in hospital and had an infusion for a week. And that didn't do much for me, but it is, you know, it has helped other people. I'd say now at 32, it's definitely the worst my symptoms have ever been. But I also feel that, you know, it's probably the coldest that it's been in a long time as well. And the doctors usually just come back with the answer that I should just move abroad. That's their answer. So I think that, moving to a hot country in the future is perhaps the answer.
Well, I mean, if you've got the opportunity, why not? But, so, I mean, that being said, Viagra is basically for do with blood flow, isn't it? So is Raynaud's the extremities are cold because the blood's not reaching them, or is that why it works?
Yeah. So basically the blood vessels, they thin. So when you take Viagra, it increases the blood flow to that area. But often what happens for me is that the center part of my body gets really, really hot, and like it sort of eventually makes its way to my hands. It increases the blood flow around my heart.
Right. Is that considered as a performance-enhancing drug when you're doing CrossFit?
Don't know.
We'll just keep that one quiet if it does.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have thought so. I hope not.
It'd make a good headline. You know, woman banned from CrossFit games due to taking Viagra.
Well, blimey, Dave. I mean, if you think that I'm games level athlete,
hey, I've seen you move. You are one hell of an athlete, and I will not allow any putting down of yourself around these parts.
Thank you. I'll take that.
So, obviously, as you know, when you said, you know, you first noticed it when you were kind of coming out of the cold, and your mum had it as well, but did your parents not know about the condition at that point? Did they just think you were just more susceptible to the cold than other people? Like, how was that kind of treated?
Yeah, if I'm honest, I don't really remember at what stage it went from my mum saying she just got cold to saying she had Raynauds. I don't know if maybe as a child she thought that I wouldn't really understand what Raynauds was, so she just called it being cold. Because as I got older, she was like, "Yeah, I've got Raynauds." Mine is actually a lot more severe than my mum's now, though, which is not usually the way around that it would be. She just gets a little bit cold, you'd say. Like her fingers go like maybe white sometimes, whereas I go sort of blue and black sometimes.
So how did it kind of How did it impact you mentally growing up? Like, you weren't able to kind of play out in the snow with your friends, or, every time it got cold, you might notice it more than other people, or you might, be much more uncomfortable in situations where other people just are kind of just feeling a little bit of a chill.
Yeah, I guess the anxieties around it sort of built up steadily over time. And it began with me not wanting to go places because it was cold. So, for example, even going to the supermarket is going to cause an attack for me. So when I say attack, I mean my hands will go so numb that I probably won't be able to use them properly. So I have to plan which order I'm going to go around the supermarket so that I can still use my hands when it comes to packing my bags. And like, I can't dawdle down the freezer and the fridge aisles, for example, because that would just cause me trouble. I have to know what I'm getting down those aisles.
Yeah.
So things like that started popping into my head initially. And then, as you mentioned, with my CrossFit, I'd go in and just extra layers, not really thinking much of it. But then people comment on that,
right.
And they don't mean anything by it. And they just go, "Oh, are you cold?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm freezing actually." And they go, "Oh yeah, I get cold too." And I'm like, "No, you don't." With that being said, I've been really, really lucky in the CrossFit box I was at initially. They were brilliant in supporting me, and they sort of came up with things that I could hold that were hot, and they put tape around the bars for me. And it's a bit of a health and safety hazard, like working out in your coat. But my current box, like they don't mention it. They know that I'm doing what I can just to be there and to move.
Yeah.
So yeah, initially it was sort of me thinking, oh, okay, I don't want to be cold. And I had to slowly and steadily get more and more organized for everything that I wanted to do. Then the pressure sort of started to come with people mentioning it. And I think I got quite snappy with people sometimes, and I'd sort of have to go back and apologize a few days later. But then I actually started not wanting to go out and do things with my friends as soon as it got to like the colder months, because I was worried that I would put a downer on their night out. Because if I was just complaining about being cold all night, then like that would ruin what they wanted to do, or it would maybe change what we were doing, or I just wouldn't enjoy being there at all. And all I'd think about was going home to be warm. And then it also meant that, or it still means that when I do go out, I don't even feel like there's any point in me dressing up, because I do look really nice, but it's also under my coat and my jumper and my scarf and so you can't see what I look like. So it just really started to impact those things, I guess. And then, sometimes at CrossFit, I can't feel my toes. And if I can't feel my toes, I can't do a box jump.
Yeah.
And I'll wear my gloves for as long as I can, but it gets to a certain point where you can't wear them anymore. And then like your grip starts to go, or maybe you wear your gloves too long and then your hands get sweaty, and then you've like done the opposite. So it's just a constant thing, constant in my head. I've got a dog now, and actually he's been really amazing in a sense that he's forced me to get outside more when it's been cold, when actually every part of me wants to stay inside in a million layers because I'm so scared of how cold I get. So yeah, anxiety wise, it's been huge, and I've had lots of internal fights with myself. My partner's amazing. He is always asking me, like, have you taken your Viagra? Have you got enough layers on? Have you got a spare pair of shoes? Like he's always there, like, just making sure. And, for Christmas and birthdays, I get all the warm things. So yeah, I'm really lucky that I've got so much support. But I can imagine that if I was single and without a dog, I think I would be in a very, very different place.
Right. you'd be instead of the crazy cat lady, the crazy coat lady.
Yeah. Yeah.
Understandable though. And it's like when you were talking about it then, it's like I could sense something that we hear a lot within the mental health space, which is the comments that people make. They're not necessarily a problem the first time you hear them. So someone saying, "Oh, you're cold," it's like it's not really an issue if you hear that once in a while. You don't. It's the repetition. It's the fact that you kind of always getting it. And then sometimes what will happen is that you said you snapped and had to apologise to people. Often that'll be the 10th or 15th person that said that to you that day. And we go into those interactions with the weight of those other 10 interactions on our shoulders when we're actually doing it. And it's something we see all the time. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally get it. Like in the summer, I can wear a pair of shorts to CrossFit, but I still need to wear my gloves. Right. So I totally get to look at a person that looks like she's dressed for summer, but she's left her hands in the winter. Like I get it. I can, and it's not unusual to comment on it. But like you said, once it feels like it's the only thing that people notice about me. Mm. So it's yeah, great.
So you said before, like when the doctors see it so much that they don't really kind of offer any help. How common is it?
I think that it's just become a lot more known now than what it was previously, which is great. But I would say, whenever I mention it to someone or someone sees my hands, I'd say like at least 1 in 3 people will say, yeah, my dad, or yeah, I know someone, or yeah, me too. So it's, I think it's very common, but the thing is that I mentioned obviously how it can be triggered through the cold, but it can actually be triggered through stress and anxiety as well.
Okay.
So I think that maybe it's a symptom that's coming on more and more for people, and it can come on at any point in life as well. So it's not necessarily something that you'll have noticed from being a child. And there's primary Raynauds, which is just Raynauds on its own. And then there's secondary Raynauds, where it's usually linked to another autoimmune disease. So some people have that as well as another condition as well.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say we've kind of got suspicion because it comes in range as well. So like some, as you said, yours and your mum's aren't the same level of severity.
No.
Is it always coupled with like the discoloration of the hands?
Pretty much that. Yeah. That's pretty much like the first initial symptom of it.
Yeah.
Which some people can get that and not have Raynauds. Like every now and then, if you were maybe doing like ice baths, for example, that loads of people are doing at the minute, like I would sort of expect that to happen, like between sort of warming up and being in it. But it's when it sort of sticks around for a while, or maybe when you get sort of like a couple of fingers and not the whole hand.
Yeah. So being a nutrition coach, is there anything like nutritionally that you found helps?
Yes and no. So in terms of sort of making sure your diet's nutritionally packed, I'd say no, because I eat very well and my symptoms are very bad.
Have you tried eating very bad to see if your symptoms?
Well, I literally, I was about to say, but you could argue that I've not experimented on the other side. I have, however, realised that if you get cold from the inside, you will be colder on the outside. So what I mean by that is when it gets to the colder months, I limit cold drinks. My first drink in the morning can't be a cold one if I'm about to leave the house, especially if I'm about to go to the gym. So I have to have like a hot water. It's usually a coffee, but I like to have like some water before my coffee. No cold foods, basically. So every meal has to be a hot meal. And if I want ice cream or an ice lolly or something like that, I eat it in the bath. Like that sounds hilarious, but it's the only way for me to not get really cold afterwards. So yeah, they're my biggest nutritional
So is this where
discoveries.
Is this where the obsession with baked oats begins then? Because it's a very wholesome, warm, hearty meal.
Yeah. So porridge, baked oats, anything that can be hugged in general. And I mean, I'm sure I must have burnt my mouth quite a few times. You can get it in your tongue, and I think I must have it in my tongue because sometimes I eat foods and I get like porridge sweats afterwards. So I'm like, oh, that must have been like really hot. But I couldn't tell. The warmth is always welcomed. And then when it gets to summer, I really love smoothie bowls. But I just have to be really careful as and when I can have one, which really sucks.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if your body's using any of the heat that you need for the extremities more more internally to try and kind of like warm up your digestive tract or anything like that, it makes sense that it's prioritizing those areas. Any other like lifestyle interventions or stuff like that you found work?
So I wear gloves in the house because if not, like literally like just typing at the computer, my hands get too cold. I have I don't know what they're called. I first got one in Australia. I have these little like can warmers. No, they're not a warmer.
Yeah, koozies. I think they call the koozies. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, so if I do want a cold drink, I have to pop it in one of those, so my hand's not like directly touching it. To get things out of the freezer, I have to use a tea towel or ask my partner to get it out of the freezer for me. Basically, prevention is like way better than trying to cure it. Like sometimes when I get cold, it can take me hours and hours to get warm. Whereas if I don't get cold in the first place, that sort of sorts it really. And I've also found for myself that exercise really, really helps. And not even for like the fitness aspect, but more so I think that it just helps get the blood flowing better around the body, which is why I like to exercise in the morning. If I exercise in the morning, I'm warmer throughout the rest of the day.
Yeah. I suppose CrossFit's probably, it's a bit of a double-edged sword of a choice, I imagine, because as you say, there's lots of things like cold bars, cold kettlebells. Like a lot of the equipment in CrossFit is very, very cold in the winter. But at the same time, it does have that whole, and without us getting too into the bloody the workout weeds of the afterburn effect, where you actually retain heat for a substantial portion of the day later on. So how you've mentioned social events like nights out and stuff like, and I've seen the reason I'm asking this particularly is because I seem to recall a picture of you and Matt at a wedding last year, looking particularly, both of you just like amazing, by the way. You've got a very, very handsome partner. Don't tell him I said that. And so how does that work at events like that, like for weddings and stuff, where like there's set canapes and there's set meals or glasses of champagne or whatever?
So on that day, I literally traveled there in Ugg boots and a coat. So I have layers on to travel there in, and in case I have to change footwear. I mean, I wouldn't have put Uggs on, but I probably would have changed out of sandals if I needed to, and just layers for when I go home. And on that particular day, we didn't spend most of the day together because he was outside with everyone else. I was outside until the sun had gone, and then I had to go inside for the rest of the day. It was just too cold for me. If the glass has a stem, so like champagne or something, that's good because I don't then have to touch it. So that's another thing that I do whenever I go out. I'm always asking if I can have a glass with a handle or with a stem. I should give you this. Oh,
for people who are listening on audio only, it's a goblet inside of a giant gauntlet. It's never been drank out of, but it's because it's not got much volume. But that'd be perfect for champagne.
I mean, can you imagine if I got my own glass?
I think
Can I
so.
have it in this?
You know what? I'd love it. I went to a wedding once where the son of the groom was the best man, and he, with his full suit on, wore socks and slides before they were even fashionable. I mean, I still don't think they're fashionable now. Sorry to all my socks and slides lovers out there, but I was like, at a wedding in Dublin on Paddy's Day while it was snowing. It was like, so I imagine that whole combination just makes you, like, you know, makes your symptoms go, stop talking, Dave.
Well, do you know what though? Like, I would love to even be able to consider going skiing,
Right.
but I genuinely think that I would die. That sounds very melodramatic, but I don't think I'd cope.
No.
And I'd love to ski.
I need to get you this pair of gloves that I saw a guy wearing when I was on holiday, and he was an engineer, and you could tell because everything about him was like precise. But he had a set of gloves like yours, but they had a mitten flap over the back. So like he was taking pictures while we were out, and then when he stopped taking pictures, he pulled the mitten flap over the top. Because I was like, I don't tend to wear gloves when I'm out, like if I'm taking photos or anything, because I have no dexterity as soon as I'm in gloves, and I'm like, I've always considered fingerless ones for that. But those things, they just had this kind of giant floofy mitten flap at the back, and I'm just like, that's genius. I need a pair of those. But so I had a follow-up question to do with the wedding. I can't remember it now. But I suppose, like, obviously, like you couldn't. You feel that would be one of those situations where you kind of got to deal with either the Raynauds or the social anxiety, or maybe a lovely combination of the two.
Yeah, and sometimes I have this like internal battle with myself of, are you actually going to get cold? Like, why don't you go and see if you get cold? But then I'm like, but what if I get so cold that I'm so miserable that I just want to go home? So then I'm like, so it's just better to avoid it.
Yeah.
But that often means that, you know, I have to separate myself like from what I will actually want to do. And I always worry that people think that is what I want to do. Like it's not what I want to do, but like it's what I have to do.
Yeah. Like, yeah, we kind of came across this situation again when talking about mental health a few weeks back. Is like people will be like, "Oh, you're using your situation as an excuse." It's like, no, trust me, I would very much like to be doing the thing that everyone else is doing. I would very much like to be doing that without crippling social anxiety. I don't just have social anxiety because I mean, don't get me wrong, I do love staying at home in like my dressing gown and slippers. It's great, but it's like not when I actually genuinely want to be at something, and like I can't. Not that I can't. Well, I don't want to. I can't do it. Like I can't get myself to be there. And thankfully, most of my close friends know that that's the case now. And weirdly, that gives me this strange buffer because I know that they're all going to be cool if I turn up and I'm this socially awkward person that doesn't know how to string two words together. Most of my friends are really good with that, but when it's people that I don't know intermingled with that, it can be really difficult because all I need usually is a period of time where there's space allowed for that, and then I'm okay. Like genuinely, when I first met you, that was a day when my social anxiety had disappeared out the window, which was great because I met you at the second time I was at a BTN conference, and the first, actually no, I think I didn't meet you at the first time as well. Yeah, but I'd already spoken to you beforehand, so that was easy. Because that first BTN conference, I basically spoke to nobody unless they came up to me first. And then the second one, I was like, my social anxiety had a holiday that day. And I was just chatting away and everything was lovely. And I was like, wow. It's like, and even Ben was like, you was like totally different today. I'm like, yeah, no, because I turned up without my condition. It's like, I didn't actually say that to him because I didn't understand it like that at the time. But that's what it was, you know. I remember thinking, I'm cured, I'm fixed. This is never going to be a problem again if I can work a room like that. Nope, not worked a room like that once since. So, but hey, it's. But the point being is that we don't want to use these things as an excuse. We'd actually much rather not be experiencing that thing ourselves and be doing the thing that you think we're trying to get out of. Have you ever been too hot? Ever?
Yes, yeah, a few times traveling. Yeah. So I went traveling for a year. I went to Australia, New Zealand, Bali, and Thailand, and a few times whilst I was traveling, I definitely experienced that. Yeah, I can feel hot. Sometimes, like I say, I don't know if it's a very female thing. It often gets quoted that way, but I sometimes run a bath that's far too hot. Um, I actually have to get my partner to check the water now, because I can't actually judge the temperature of the water properly. And I've actually got a really sore chilblain on my finger at the minute, where basically you can get chilblains if you are really cold and then you like put your hands under hot water or something.
Right.
The temperature changes too quickly. So you get this sore lump that's called a chilblain. Like it's a bit like a blister under the skin, I guess. But the other day we we came back. I can't remember where we had been, and I'd left something to soak in the kitchen, and I put my hands in to empty the plug, and I said, "Oh my goodness, that water is still hot! I can't believe it's still hot after 3 hours." Matt put his hands in. He was like, "Chelsea, it's freezing. It's just because your hands are so cold. The water is still warmer than your hands."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I actually have no proper temperature gauge, it turns out, which is a little bit scary, because like most people use their hands to see how hot or cold things are.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense though, because like we check it by comparison. It's why you're told like testing bathwater for a baby, it's like sticking your elbow in or something rather than your hands, because your hands usually are not an adequate, they're not a relative kind of thing to check temperature with. And if your hands are feeling, if that water is warmer than your hands are, the water should feel warm regardless of whether you feel warm or not, in theory. But yeah, so what was, when you said obviously like traveling, what was when you got like too hot for the like first time? Was it kind of like pleasantly nice and then okay, I'm done with this now, or was it like what was that feeling like?
I don't think I recognized it until the day after,
Okay.
and it sort of hit me like, whoa. I just experienced that. But I wouldn't say that it didn't feel unnormal for me. But it's a feeling that I'd like to feel more often.
Fair enough. If you ever do take the doctor's orders and move to a warmer country, have you got anywhere that's on the list?
Well, I lived and worked in Melbourne, and my heart yearns for it a little bit. I miss it so much. So I'd love to go back there. But the best thing about traveling is that it taught me that there are so many beautiful places in the world that I had no idea existed. So I think that, I couldn't possibly say right now, because there's so many nice places.
Yeah. Well, I've just got back from Chile and Argentina, and we did like the circumnavigation from Santiago in Chile down over the bottom of South America and up to back to Buenos Aires. There's a lot of temperature change there.
Yeah.
I'd packed mostly summer stuff, and I'm like, it's South America. They're in the southern hemisphere. It's their summer right now. Yeah. I mean, like when we got to the Falkland Islands, which are still British, it's like, yep, this is British weather. It's like, but yeah, it's weird. Like within the same country, it's like Chile being so long. It was like 28 degrees on the first day, and then 2 days later, it's like 8 degrees. And
yeah, I didn't do my research on Australia either. I didn't realize that, like, depending on where you are, depends on like how different the temperature is. Like in Melbourne, it's a little bit like English weather, to be honest. You get about 3 different weather conditions in the same day. So you had to go out with like an umbrella and a coat, but also like be in shorts and a tank top, because it would be really hot at some point in the day.
Yeah. So do you find like in England that you actually have to take extra stuff with you? Like have you got extra clothes with you, or just layered up?
Honestly, I am so sick of the amount of layers that I have to wear. Like most days, like if I'm going to the gym, especially, I will wear probably a minimum of 3 layers. And that's like sort of trousers as well as jumpers. And that's not even including my coat. Like, I wear as many layers as possible. And that is something that took me quite a while to learn, to be honest. I used to think that just wearing thick clothes was the answer, but actually wearing multiple layers is a better way to go, like especially with socks. Apparently the first layer keeps the temperature in, and then the second layer like keeps the cold out. Apparently this is just what I've heard. It seems to work, so I'm going with it.
Go through.
I was going to say, just learning things like keeping, like sometimes I'll wear like sweatbands on my wrists because that's a place that really keeps temperature in, and like wearing a hat makes all the difference. But yeah, my car looks like I've got a second wardrobe in there because I'm like forever like leaving the gym with my wardrobe. I just chuck it in the back of my car and get on my way.
Fair enough. So, you know, obviously you said you, like a lot of people have said the kind of, oh yeah, we all feel the cold, or I feel the cold too. Has there been anything that you've been able to say to them that, like any analogies or anything that helps a person who doesn't know what it's like to at least get a glimpse into what you're feeling versus what they're feeling?
Not really. I wish there was. I really wish there was. I mean, that I can sometimes explain to people things like, I'm so grateful that we can now use contactless at the supermarket, because there were times when I got to the till and I couldn't input my own PIN into the keypad. And I'd have to say, like, look, I'm going to have to go and sit in my car for 20 minutes. I'll come back and pay for this. Like, but I can't, like, and I even said to them, can you put my PIN in for me? If I type it on my phone, will you put it in? And they're not allowed to.
Yeah.
So I couldn't even pay for my shopping sometimes, or sometimes I'll get in the car and I can't drive. Like my hands aren't ready, and it'd be unsafe for me to do so. So sometimes when I explain things like that to people, they say, "Oh yeah, I'm not that bad." That usually helps them understand a little bit. But I guess I worry that I'm not trying to say mine's worse than yours. I mean, it might be, but I'm not trying to be like, you know what I mean?
I know. It's like, well, I just putting things into kind of analogies that help people who don't suffer with them understand those. I call it bridging the gap. It's something that it's what I'm about to say. It's my favorite thing to do. Like, yeah, as if, you know, I think eating is my favorite thing to do, but no, it's one of my favorite things to do. And it's like trying to explain to someone what social anxiety feels like versus being awkward, like in a social situation, or being uncomfortable in a social situation. Especially with depression, I'm constantly trying to figure out like a ways for a non-depressed person to feel like, to understand the whole why a person with depression can't brush their teeth, for example. And it's not like I'm trying to say my depression's worse than anybody else's, but it's just trying to when people say, oh, we're all a bit depressed, or we're all a bit OCD, or we're all a bit autistic, I'm like, no, we're really not.
I'd love to be able to have one. So if you're up for helping me to create a good one to explain to people, that would be really great.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've experienced hypothermia. I'll try and explain my non-Raynauds experience of hypothermia and see if it comes anywhere close to it, because a lot of people have. And it was when I was training for my first marathon, and I decided I had a 17 and a half pre-run picked out, and all the rest of it, training run picked out. And when I opened, this is the end of December 2018, let's call it, maybe 2017, and I opened the curtains, and the wind was blowing sideways and it was hailing, and I was like, by the point at which you've got to like 17 miles, you've had to deal with all of your own excuses a lot by that point, and try and figure out, is this just an excuse, or do I really not go? This was one of those days where my sensitivity should have been like, no, you really should not go. Because I went out, did it anyway. And I remember literally giving myself a pep talk all the way through the whole thing, being like, this is how warriors are made. like running through this. And then when I finished it, my body's like used all of its glycogen, everything. It's run out of ways to heat itself up. I'm not even hot while I'm running by this point. And then I got in the car. Now I've got strong air conditioner in the car with for heat, and I've got a very powerful heated seat in the car. And I was running with a friend, so I was 30 minutes away from my house. By the time I got home, having had the heat on full belt and the heated seat on 100% of the time, I was still cold, and I felt like I couldn't get warm at all from anything. I felt like nothing would make me warm. And Alona had ran me a bath, and I got into the bath and just still felt like I was there in a boiling hot bath, shivering away.
Yeah, that sounds horrendous. I'd say I've only not let myself. I've only got that cold a few times, and the bath is one of the only things you can do really, because you're what I call cold to the bone.
Yeah.
And like you said, you literally can't see yourself ever being warm ever again. I get something that me and Matt call, and it's terrible really. I don't want to offend anyone by saying this, but I call it stroke face.
Right.
Because sometimes when I'm walking, if I'm talking to someone, I notice I start slurring because my face has got so cold that I can't talk properly. And if my face especially gets cold, if I've been out by myself and I come in, Matt will often say to me, like, you're cold, because he can see by looking at me, like my skin goes a bit yellow and I look really, really sick. It's that feeling of being cold to the bone, and I can't do anything. I can't then focus on work. I can't even really have a conversation with Matt, because my head is just consumed with the fact that I am so cold. And I just need to be warm. And like I said, poor Matt, he puts up with a lot. Can you imagine what it's like wanting to touch your partner's leg or your partner's arm, but being worried that they're gonna pull away from you? I can't tell you how.
Yes, I can, but it's nothing to do with cold. No, she's just repulsed by me at this point.
Don't be ridiculous.
No, actually, to be fair, she's very sensitive with the cold, and this is why I said, is there always a discoloration? Because we've often wondered whether there's more to it than just being struggling with the cold. Because she's Latvian, she grew up in literal Baltic winters.
Wow.
Yeah. -40 winters, and she's getting worse. As you said, it can get worse with age and stuff, and she's getting worse and worse at being able to handle a British winter. And I know we've just had a particularly brutal one, but honestly, and as you say, she can't, when she gets to that certain degree, level of coldness, she can't focus on a conversation. She's it's everything is focused. It's like okay, we need to get this woman warm straight away. But
yeah, and I'm sure it's the same for her. Matt's very hot-blooded, so I'm always hold my hand, give me a hug, can I please use your body heat to warm me up? But equally, if he then jumps or pulls away from me, it feels awful, because you're my boyfriend doesn't want me to touch him. But it's not that. It's just I wouldn't want someone cold touching me either. So I have to remind myself of that. But like I said, he's very, very good. And he's stopped any facial expressions now when I shock him with the colds, which I appreciate very much.
So basically, again, were you saying a lot of people do struggle with the cold? What is is there a test that the doctors need to do? What is the way to figure out whether you are someone who just suffers with the cold, or whether you have Raynauds?
So you can go on the official Raynauds website, and there's a test on there that you can do. But it is always better to get it done through the doctors because, like I said, if it is the secondary Raynauds, it could be that it's alongside another condition that you may need to get checked out.
Yeah.
Not everyone will be offered medication either. Like I said, you really sort of have to pester and push hard for that, in my experience at least. But it's usually the discoloration of the hands. So if that happens, I really recommend that you take a picture of it because it will be sod's law that the day you go to the doctors, like your hands are normal coloured and you can't quite show them. So I'd say take pictures and at least go and get some advice from them because I feel like you'll look after yourself a lot better if you've maybe got the official diagnosis than if you're like, oh, I just get cold, like it doesn't matter. Because you could slow down at the rate that it comes on, maybe if you look after yourself well.
Yeah. Is there like any like online support groups or anything that you know of for?
Yeah, so I'm part of the Raynauds UK Facebook page, and that's great. It's a lot of sort of people saying, you know, I've had this happen today. Is this normal? Or I'm in pain. Can anyone help me? Like, what do you guys do? And sometimes just going on there and saying like, I'm really struggling, guys. Sometimes saying I've found these amazing gloves or I've found these amazing shoes. So yeah, it is brilliant, and it feels nice to go in there knowing that, you know, everyone's gonna understand how you feel mentally and physically.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. So on Raynauds, is there anything else that you want to add that I've not led you towards with the questions?
I don't think so. I think we've covered it pretty broadly. But yeah, just, you know, if anyone is suffering, even if you maybe don't think you've got Raynauds and you do just get cold, really do try having, you know, only hot drinks, only hot food, and see if that helps at all. So it's one of the things that's made a really big difference, as long as I sort of stick to that. And it's always better to wear more layers and take them off than it is to not have enough layers and get so cold that you get cold to the bone, like we were saying.
Yeah, that is actually kind of one thing I found this last winter is that if you said before, again, if your objective is to not get cold in the first place, and when we've been out walking the dog and stuff the last winter, it's like I've always kind of put more on than I needed to, like, and that seems to have done the trick from a, again, non-Raynaud suffering kind of just regular, I want to fight the cold kind of point of view. But that seems to have done the trick a lot more than trying to get warm. Because like going back to that marathon analogy that I talked about before, is like once you get to a point of being really cold, that's generally speaking hypothermia. If someone gets hypothermic, it's like if they've got cold over a long period of time, it's harder to get them warm again, and they have to be made warm again over a long period of time. It's not just a case of like, you know, like we're going to quickly put them in a bath, and like you said about those what they're called again, chilblains. That just sounds like it should be like a vampire villain. It's like,
well, oh yeah, that's a really good point.
It's a very cool name for a horrible thing.
Once you do get cold, it is so important that you bring your temperature up slowly and not too quickly, because that is when you can really hurt like your skin and your body. So yeah, I would love to jump into a boiling hot bath and that cure me in a minute, but I tend to sort of get into one that's still, you know, still hot but just not burning, and then you can add more and more hot water as your body comes round to it. The shower's a bit more dangerous for me because, like I said, just sort of it feels great, like you don't realize that it's burning. But yeah, definitely if anyone's getting too cold, just start with lukewarm and then slowly build your way up. Yeah.
Awesome. If anyone from chat has got any questions for Chelsea, pop them in now. We're going to be wrapping up in the next sort of 5 minutes. And cool. So non-related, well, I suppose it's technically still related to Raynauds. You mentioned obviously there's a lot of anxiety around will I get an attack and any of that stuff. Is there anything else mental health related that, whether it's related to this or not, that you'd like to bring some attention to while we've got the time?
Well, I guess something that I suffered with, I don't know, about a year ago now, and I'm very lucky that they've sort of disappeared for a while now, is that I did have quite a few panic attacks sort of this time last year. I definitely saw that with those, my symptoms were quite bad at that time as well. So like I said, it is very much related to stress and anxiety. But just that with those panic attacks, it was very much a therapy, various therapies that helped me sort of overcome those. I know that that's something that you've had some experience with. How do you talk to people about panic attacks? Because actually in my therapy sessions, I was advised not to call them panic attacks because that gives them too much, power. Yeah. So a panicking episode. But but if you say a panicking episode to someone that's not had that experience, they wonder what the hell you're talking about.
I like how to explain a panic attack to a person who's never experienced one. It's weird because you have to tell them it's something else that they've probably never experienced as well, which is a heart attack, because that's what most people confuse a panic attack for. And one of the most important things to kind of like you panic about the fact that you're panicking, so it becomes this positive reinforcement cycle, but it's obviously not positive. It's just the mechanism's called a positive reinforcement cycle, because the more you panic, the worse the symptoms feel. The worse the symptoms feel, the more you panic. There's a few things that I've found that really help. One, I read a book, or listened to the audiobook called The Dare Response recently, DARA. And I was very skeptical about this book because the guy, even though he's got an Irish accent and those things, usually like just basically go straight past my defenses. But the guy talks about it as curing anxiety. And anytime someone uses the word cure, like, I know it's weird because eventually they might actually create the actual cure to anxiety. And I'll be like, no, not going to believe it. You can't cure it. Which, again, your own biases do play a role in this, but this guy talks about curing anxiety. But basically, there's a weird thing where actually, if you kind of weirdly run towards the thing that's making you anxious, it trains your body to actually. It's like fight or flight in reverse. If it's something that's actually that you should be running away from, it's not necessarily anxiety. That's what you should be doing. You should be running away from it. Don't go running towards an actual lion or something. But like actually leaning in and running towards the thing that you're afraid of actually can really help. For some people. The most important thing is to know that all people are individual, and therefore there's no one way that's going to handle everybody. And the other thing that I've found that really works is, instead of going with a particular style of breathing technique, so going with like box breathing, for example. Box breathing being 2 seconds in, hold for 2 seconds, 2 seconds out, hold for 2 seconds, or the same equivalent, 3 seconds, 4 seconds. Chances are a person in a panic attack is not going to be able to go from like full on hyperventilating to box breathing. So if I teach people to just make the next breath longer than the last, even if it's by a split second, because then what it does is it moves the goalposts to where that person currently is. So if that person's in full hyperventilation, I always get hyper and hypo the wrong way around. But if that person's in full blown hyperventilation, then getting them to even just go from to like that little, I can't wait to see what this sounds like on the podcast, but it's like getting them to move even that little bit. It does two things. One, it starts getting them back into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is good. But two, it shows them one thing that they still have control over. You might not have control over the thing that you're panicking about. You know, you might not have control over how the social event goes, or whether you're going to get cold, or like where, you know, or how the meeting at work's going to go, or whatever it is that you're panicking about. You might not have control over that thing, but you still have control over your breath. And being able to exercise that control, again, especially if you're able to sit there and talk through it with someone, it works a lot better than. But if you teach someone this a few times, they can self-regulate with it. Like I can't, have I even had one that would? I don't think I've had one that I can't regulate in years now. So so that helps a lot. But again, it's just like what your therapist said about not naming them that. That's really useful if that methodology works for you. It's understanding that and all of us as you being a nutrition coach, me being a mindset coach, we all want to think that we're going to be the one that can coach everybody. But if you have an infinite number of techniques and you know exactly when to use them, then maybe, but not everyone responds to every technique. And it took me quite a little bit of time to get my head around that one, because I'm like there's this great trick with a juggling ball that works 100% of the time on every single person that I've used it with so far. I keep on thinking that, and I tell people that when I'm doing it, and I'm like, go on, you can be the first that it doesn't work for, and thankfully it has worked on it. But there is also 100% of people it doesn't work for, and they're the ones that go, that looks stupid, I'm not going to do it. So, genuinely, 99% of my job is not telling people what to do. It's getting them to do the thing I tell them to do.
Yeah, no, I remember your videos actually with the balls. I think I've sent quite a few people your way to watch the videos on.
You've seen my videos with the balls. I don't think I put them anywhere. Sorry.
No, I say with the balls because I'm sure you did more than one.
Well, that's the whole thing with social media. You have to put the same thing out 152 times, and that took me a long time to learn that as well, because I thought, I'm not going to put this out because people are going to be like, oh, you're always putting the same thing out. No, that never happens. Like, no one ever tells me that. Now someone will, because as soon as you say it never happens, it'll happen. But no one ever says you're always posting this one. But what usually happens is either someone new will see it for the first time, or someone who saw it once before but needed a little nudge in the right direction will see it now. I'm going to jump to we've got a couple of questions. Well, we've got at least one. I haven't scrolled to the bottom yet. But I think this is a really important question to ask. Does alcohol have a noticeable effect on Raynauds?
So I may not be the best person to ask that question because I don't drink a lot. And there's a part of alcohol that's cold or not cold. So a lot of the time I will go for red wine because it can be at room temperature. And when I have a gin and tonic, like, I do feel the cold more, but it's hard to say whether that's because I have an ice cube in it. I do hold the stem, but it still makes me cold, and I don't really like warm gin. I personally would say no. I don't think it does. I don't think it makes my symptoms worse. But there's a lot of contributing factors. So, for example, if I was out drinking in a beer garden, it'd be hard to know whether that was because I'm outside in the cold or whether it's because of the alcohol. I'm sorry, that's not a very clear answer.
No, it's a good answer. It's a good answer, and it's an honest answer. And I guess it probably if it, as you said, you're not really a big drinker, so it wouldn't be one that you'd notice maybe as much. But I imagine if it is something that is then on the support groups, it'd be something that is spoken about quite a bit. Yeah,
it's not something I've seen come up.
All right, awesome. I think there was just that one. Let me just double check. No, there is not. Okie dokie. So, cool. Well, is there anything else you want to add before we wrap this up?
Yes, I would. So when I first passed my nutrition course, straight after, you gave me the opportunity to come and do your mindset course. And I still use some of the things that I learned on that course today, because nutrition is probably about 70, maybe even 80% mindset and like 20% food. So I am forever using your analogies, your boomerang and slingshots, your mindful eating tasks that you did with us. And like I said, you've actually got
this one was made by Tom, you know.
Yes, he is so good at that. Amazing. My clients love it. And I always send over, like I said, if I know someone's struggling sort of in terms of anxiety, depression, those kinds of things, I've often sent them your videos where you sort of discuss things there. So I just wanted to say thank you, because you've really helped me help my clients more.
Okay, I'm going to keep myself together. Thank you. Like, honestly, first of all, that course, you were on the trial of that course, and that course got to a trial, and then that was it. Oh
my goodness, what?
Yeah, exactly. There wasn't enough interest to run a second one. I know, and that, but the thing is, that is actually, interestingly enough, when you said, like, nutrition is like it's 70% of getting the person to actually do the thing. The same as what I kind of said before, and that was how I ended up doing what I do now, is the fact that I was on a nutrition course where well, not all of this, but where mindset was taught as a module for that very reason, at an actual university course, doing an actual nutrition course. Even they were saying the same thing, of that, like, you need to understand how to coach, and you need to understand how to get a person to do the things that you're saying to them, because actually one of the biggest things you're going to struggle with is not putting the right information in front of them. It's getting them to do it. And if you're listening to this and you feel called out because someone's told you to do something and you've not done it yet, I understand there are many, many, many things that could be in your way. But maybe before you ask for a new piece of advice from somebody else, ask yourself this: what advice have I already got that I've not acted upon yet? Because believe me, the power is in the implementation. Knowledge itself isn't power. The use of that knowledge is the power.
Yeah. And I mean, to be honest, some people that have come to work with me, I have advised that they go and work with a therapist or on their mental health on its own without working on nutrition as well, because actually sometimes that's far more important that it goes in that order than the other way around. You can sort your food out, you can eat the best foods and train really hard, but if your mental health isn't feeling healthy, then you're not healthy overall. It's not a good place to be in, and sometimes those things, exercise and eating healthily, it can actually make your mental health worse. So it is something that they need to be together.
Yeah, well, my relationship with food, because my relationship with food was terrible, but it went too far in the opposite direction when I learned about nutrition and when I learned about what was healthy. We're doing big air quotes for those that are just on audio. And I mean, that's why, like, orthorexia now is an eating disorder, which is essentially the obsession with tracking everything being, for want of a better word, clean. Speaking of nutrition, if people want to learn more about that, you're a person that they can do that from. So that was a nice, clean segue, that, Dave. Where is the best? I know we already did this at the very, very beginning of the podcast, but for one more time at the top, at the end of the podcast, where is the best place for people to find it, like to connect with you, find out a bit more about what you do nutritionally, all that stuff?
Yeah, so I am on socials as Chelsea Lea Nutrition. So that's CHELSEA LEA and then nutrition. That's on Facebook and Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I also have a website, which is chelsea-lee.co.uk. And you can send me a direct message on any of those platforms, and I'll be more than happy to get in contact back. And in terms of Dave's mindset course that never went past the trial, if you would love to hear more about that or get Dave to make it an official course, then I suggest that we comment on this post or comment to me and I'll forward it on, because it's genuinely a course that I think needs to be a real thing.
Cool. I mean, it sort of became a real thing with what I do for the NHS now. I do every now and then consider bringing it back, simply because I've got all the material for it. But thank you. I will. I did not pay for that plug. I promise you all. I look at that. I'm at my mum's phoning me. She knows I'm on stream. So I think that's a good place to wrap it up. I'm not going to go and phone her back though. Sorry, Mum. I've got another hour of mental health check-in to do. So thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we got through it despite a few technical difficulties. But I will hopefully I'll just make a mental note now that there was that little bit I needed to edit, because otherwise I never edit. So that's it'll be seamless, and the people that listen to it on the audio won't know anything apart from the fact that I'm telling them about it right now. But thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for asking me. It's been really nice to be able to talk about it in a safe space.
All right, perfect. And I will catch you very, very soon.